and how true it is. Welcome to Soul Center. Good morning, Soul Center. How is everybody doing? Good. My name is Reverend Keith Horwitz. Anybody new here today? First timers? We got a couple. Oh, we got a few first timers. All right, welcome. Welcome to our community. We're part of the Agape Association of Communities, which means that we are part of not only the new thought teachings of all the ascended masters, including Michael Bernard Beckfoot, who is a living master today, but also the forefathers and the foremothers of our movement of the truth teachings. We're all inclusive, all encompassing in the realm of the mystical. For it is in the mystical, that golden thread that ties us all together. We even know that science has proclaimed that we are all tied together. The butterfly effect is something that is true. There is something that unifies all of us. And so when we move out of the dogmas and some of the limitations of certain teachings, and we move into the freedom teachings, the truth teachings that set us free, then we know exactly, as Angel was singing in the song, that there is always something there to guide us and direct us, uplift us, and connect us. And that's what we do here. We cultivate that. And one of those things that helps that sets us apart in a particular way, but then also is definitely coded in all spiritual teachings, but not always utilized, is that we consciously ask you to participate in your own spiritual evolution, as opposed to allowing a preacher or a teacher to do it for you. We're going to do as God does it, through you and as you. That is how we operate here. So we're going to encourage you to rise up into your own magnificence. So welcome here as we continue we're in a new month. We're in a new month where we are allowing ourselves, as the theme of the month is, to light it up, which is to be lit, to be inspired, to be motivated and enthusiasted by the presence of God. And so, welcome. And for those of you who are here for our first time, we're just going to bestow a blessing upon you. We're going to extend our heart through our hands. And we're going to invite you to just sit and receive. You don't have to extend your hands because you're going to participate in just receiving. Welcome to Soul Center. We see you. We know who you truly are. A divine, perfect emanation of the Most High. Created in the image and the very likeness of the divine. We welcome you. We love you. And so it is. Welcome to Soul Center. We always just part of the reason we do that, do you know what? We do that so that we can practice the art of receiving on our spiritual path as being adventurers. We are adventurers of the soul. We are here to enjoy. Life is an adventure. It's an adventure that is to be explored, and we've got to put on our adventure hat once in a while. I have to tell you that as the topic for today is to be venturous and victorious. The whole point of the human experience as spiritual beings having a human experience is to grow into your divine nature. Every single person on the planet is destined to be realized, to be self-realized. It is not for just a select few or the misinterpretation of the chosen. The chosen are those who choose. When you choose to grow and to expand through love and through joy and through spiritual principle and through spiritual practice and truth teaching, then you shall rise and you shall shine and you shall let your light flow and glow out into the world and feel your interconnectivity. As we do that, there are certain levels and certain machinations that we go through. Sometimes when we're in victim consciousness and we think that things are happening to us, we first have to become aware that we need to participate. We need to evoke the presence of God into our lives. We need to become venturous. We want to be able to seek and explore and expand and not become trapped in the mundane mediocrity of everyday life. And we also want to become adept and aware of the language of God. Yesterday I was participating in a Bible study class where it was a teacher who has worked with somebody, a gentleman who did the Lamsa Bible, which is a direct translation from Aramaic into English, with somebody who's seasoned in the authentic writings, of the writings that the Bible was scribed in. And the Bible, both the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Bible, were scribed in a particular way. And many sacred texts around the world were scribed in a particular way. They were scribed in a way where you had to be steeped in the energy of the divine to channel the writings. And then you have to also, as they were channeling the writings, it's coded and loaded with a vibrational frequency, which is why it has endured thousands of years. Some people don't like the Bible. I used to be one of those people that didn't like the Bible because I didn't know how to read the Bible. I didn't know that 90% of Scripture is metaphor. And if you don't understand idiomatic expressions, then you're going to probably be a little frightened by some of the passages. Oh, they're going to be stoned, or, oh, the sacrificing or the punishing God, of which that is not true. There is no punishing God. We know that. And when you learn about metaphysics and the laws that govern the universe, you know that there are consequences. There are consequences to things when you're in the material world. If I stick my hand into a burning fire, there's going to be a consequence until I learn to transcend that. Then I can actually stick my hand into a burning fire and nothing will happen. But there are consequences to those things, and there are masters that are living in the world right as we speak, that walk amongst us. The masters that walk amongst us, the saints that walk amongst us, they hold a vibrational frequency that is so transcendent to the material world that things like being able to put their hand into fire and to commune with animals that might be considered dangerous or venomous because they're one with them. And then at that particular elevation of consciousness, you become wholly of service to serving the world, to allowing for healing. And so all of us are on that journey. We're all headed that way. Some of us might be a little bit reluctant and sometimes acquiesce to resistance, which creates pain. And pain is just something that lets you know. So just like you need to understand how to read Scripture, you also need to understand how to read life, to understand the language of your emotional body, to understand the language of your mental body, to understand the language of sacred geometry. There are certain patterns that move through life that tell us, and if you don't understand, it's kind of like, I remember several years ago, I went to teach a class in Taipei, Taiwan, and it was the first time I had this experience where I was in a country where not only did nobody speak English, barely, but there was no signs written in our alphabet. They were all the Mandarin characters. So you're looking at it, it's like, okay, so I really had to rely on. So one of the things on the spiritual path is sometimes you have to rely on an interpreter, somebody that's going to interpret for you as well as going within to interpret for yourself. And you want to set the intention that you want to interpret correctly. You want to make sure that you understand the language of life. So it was really interesting to be in a country where I couldn't read anything. And every time I would see, a Gregorian character, I was like, woo, oh my God, look. Because you feel like, you could kind of read something. But it was also really liberating because everywhere I would go to a Buddhist temple and nobody spoke English. And I had to just rely on feeling. And there was certain rituals that they did and a certain sequence that you did at these Buddhist temples in order to experience spiritual expansion. And so I had to just feel my way into it and expand my sensorium and my internal vocabulary to understand that. So that was a beautiful experience in my book. But then years ago, when I was really starting to wake up, I experienced a not so graceful, not so fun experience called, some of you have probably either experienced or heard of, the dark night of the soul. And at its worst, the dark night of the soul, which is just a separation from God. When you are feeling completely isolated and completely separate from the divine, from life force, from chi, from prana, you are starting to diminish your capacity to feel the grace, the beauty, the light, and the love of God as life. And so I was having one of those things because one of my issues was coming up. And one of those issues that almost everybody on the planet has, everybody almost on the planet has an issue with abandonment on some level. Some people also, many people have an issue with worthiness, knowing that they are worth the entirety of the kingdom of heaven. That might seem a little out there for some people. Some people might know exactly what I'm talking about in terms of the depth of how it can hit you at your core. So in this time when I was going through my dark night of the soul, the one of several, I became very, very depressed. Depression is a tried and true sign that you are veering away from God because you are becoming more and more isolated. And the more and more isolated you become, the more thoughts, in my experience, were that I didn't want to be here anymore. And so I will be quite frank with you, at those particular times, I was thinking of ways to get out of the world. I didn't really, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being I'm going to vacate the world, I probably only ever reached maybe a 6, but it was very dark. It was very lonely. It was very isolating. And one of the things I did not want to do is I did not want to reach out for help. I didn't want to ask for help. We must ask for help. We need interpreters. We need to tap in and chime in. So on our spiritual path, as we're going through the various levels of growth and expansion, there's going to be times where we're going to go from inspiration. That's what our meditation and prayer practice is about, is to allow us to get inspired. If we're not being inspired, then we're settling for the mundane machinations of the mind that repeat things over and over, and we get stuck in rote routines. And the downside of that is we get stuck in listening to the misinterpretations of the trauma body, which allow us to make decisions from fear. We don't want to make decisions from fear. When you make decisions from fear, you are contributing to a downward spiral, and we don't want to do that. Let me tell you, if you've ever made a decision from fear, oftentimes those things blow up and exacerbate things and make things worse. But we know that in God, all things are new, and so we want to understand the language. At any moment, at any time, we can stop and we can get centered, and we can ask for help. So part of the process in the beginning is that we want to become open to inspiration through intention. We have to intend something into being. What is my intention about whatever it is? What is my intention about my health? What is my intention about my prosperity? What is my intention about my relationships? We want to become intentional beings. And so we'll move through the various stages where it is inspiration, intention, and healing. Healing. Everybody on the planet, almost everybody, except some of those masters I was talking about earlier, has something to heal. And healing just means, we know in our community, that the truth shall set you free. If you have an ailment in your body, when the truth sets you free, if I have a crick in my knee and the truth sets me free, the crick is gone, because it no longer needs to tell me about that I'm not willing to step forward into my life, because that's what the legs are. The legs and the feet are about carrying you forward in life, in the direction of your soul's purpose and your passion. But if you don't understand, and the front of your body is where you give from, and the back of the body is where you receive from. So when you start to understand the language of your body, then you'll start to understand, like, oh, and you want to understand, like, oh, so if I have resistance in my right leg versus my left leg, where the right leg is more about the material world and the left leg is more about my beingness, what do I want to not step into about my beingness if my left leg is giving me problems? What do I not want to step into in the physical world if my right leg is giving me problems? Or maybe even both. We want to start to understand that language, just like we would want to understand the language of Scripture, just like we would want to understand the language of nature, just like we want to understand the language of astrology. We want to understand the language so that we can interpret the truth. And so we move through the stages: inspiration, intention, healing, and we want to heal. So if I have a fear of heights, or if I'm an arachnophobe and I have a fear of spiders, I might want to say, I want to heal that. Some people might say, like, well, why do I want to, heal my fear of spiders? It seems like that would be a rational thing. But on that ascended track, when you get to a certain level, you're not going to be afraid of spiders because you will be communing with them. You will love them. And some of you are like, not me. So I remember when I was going through this, I felt like, oh my God, as I was coming out of the dark night, I was feeling like I'm just a hot mess, man. I am a hot mess. And I said, well, whenever you're a hot mess, you got to look for the hot message. You got to get the message out of the hot mess, because that's what's going to grow you. If you don't get the message out of the mess, you're just going to continue to make more mess. And so we want to grow in that. We want to grow and find out what is the message. So sometimes it can be a little intimidating, and so we go through the inspiration, the intention, the healing, and then we have to move into the allowing. The allowing is the next stage where you have to actually allow it. And in Scripture, it says, you are the beloved in whom God is so pleased. And I was contemplating that, and it's like, that is so true. And that is when you are realized, you will know that you are the beloved in whom God is so pleased. To have that as an actual tangible awareness in your bones. But I remember I was angry at God. I had a little bit of the old paradigm, man in the sky who may or may not grant you things, who may be punishing you for something, misinterpreting the language of karma, which is just creating more trauma in your life. And so you also want to say that God is the beloved in whom I'm so pleased. Because if it's not going both ways, I might be like, that's precisely what's keeping me from understanding or allowing the divine into my life, is because maybe I don't believe that the divine is a heavenly, benevolent, omnipotent, omniamorous, magnificent light that loves you more than you could possibly imagine with your surface mind. And so your surface mind, as it is connected to your trauma body, is what we want to become mindful of in the healing process. And that's why we lean into practitioners and to ministers and to healers, to allow ourselves to, we got to sometimes bounce something off them so we can get a clear perspective. When you're in your stuff sometimes, it's a little bit overwhelming. And so we want to become clear. And as we move through, and we get beyond needing to heal, because at some point there's going to be nothing left to heal. As you're moving in the ascended master track, moving in that trajectory, we're going to move into a space where we just go from inspiration to intention to allowing to fulfillment. And then we're going to move from inspiration into fulfillment. There'll be nothing in between. When you reach that level of mastery, it's just inspiration, fulfillment. They just come together and crash into one, and you're just living in the answered prayer. So we want to become aware of the telltale signs that are going on. And so I had a client recently, and first, let me back up. Nothing is not connected to anything. Does that make sense? Nothing is not connected to anything. Everything is connected to everything. So there's nothing that you can leave unhealed over here that is going to not affect stuff over here. And so I had a client who, she was desperately seeking a loving relationship. And she really wanted to meet her soulmate. And so we started to do the work. And as we started to do the work, we hopped onto her relationship with her mother. And that was a very strained relationship, come to find out. And little things. And so one day she came and she showed me some of the texts that she had exchanged with her mother, because she was furious and livid, and she was at the point where she just never wanted to see her mother again. And I was like, well, that's not going to be a good recipe for success. We want to heal the relationship with whomever. It doesn't matter who it is. But the way we heal those things is we got to bring it into the field of the divine, and we allow inspiration and motivation and enthusiasm to guide us and direct us. This applies to everything. This is why we sit and we be still and we know the presence of God, and we open to providence and divine directioning. From no way and nothing comes some way and something, and we open to that. And so she was having a real challenging time, and so I read the text, and some things have been going horribly wrong in this young woman's life. Car crash, breakup, you name it. There was a whole bunch of financial woes. And so her mom tended to be a little bit on the kind of irritating side and tended to be a little bit of the pushing button type. And so Irina, she was just checking in on her daughter, and her daughter didn't want to communicate with her, so she ignored her. And so as a result, her mom texted her back and said, "Are you ever going to listen to me? Are you ever going to respond to me?" And so that exacerbated it even more. And I was like, okay, all of this seems very simple and very low key. And you could tell, now this is the part where you want to become awake and aware. Her trauma body, she was making her decisions from fear, and she was so irritated and so allowing the relationship that her mom is wrong. If she would just stop behaving that way, then I would be okay. If you ever fall for that, if somebody stops behaving that way, then I'm going to be happy. No, don't do it. That is one of the ego's fanciest tricks, as old as the wheel. And we don't want to participate in that because there is nothing. If you are doing your work, nobody is going to irritate you. And that's what we want to go for and glow for. We want to move into that. We want to move into that space. And so I was reading through it and I looked at it and I was like, okay, well there seems to be like really nothing offensive going on here. So I said, you know what? We need to work on this relationship. And I offered a suggestion of what she could do on a practical level. We always want to look at the practical and the spiritual, and if nothing, then just spiritual. But we want to make sure that our intention matches up, that we're putting on our adventurous hat, that we're allowing ourselves, this is what the adventure is. I love a good adventure. I love them when they're not filled with strife, but every once in a while we come over a nugget of something. Something comes up, and this was when we really want to dig our heels in, not to resistance, but into a absolute concrete willingness to participate in the spiritual benevolent unfoldment and the healing of whatever is going on, and to understand the truth. So we want to have the intention that we are willing to understand the truth. So it took a little convincing to know, because at this particular point, she thought her mom was the enemy. Her mom was the enemy out to destroy her. And I was like, okay, we need to clear that up and just start with the intention. I'm choosing to have a beautiful and benevolent and glorious holy relationship with my mom. That's all we had to do, is first get there. But you wouldn't believe, some people can be very, no, you don't know her. You don't understand. I can't set that intention. So remembering that I'm not going to ask anybody to go to lunch with her. I'm going to say, no, just start with the intention, shoot it out there in the prayer field, and then invite her to participate in a way that is benevolent and harmonious and reverent and respectful. When you talk to somebody's soul through prayer, then you're inviting them into your life, and despite their issues, you start to heal your issues, and then they are invited to participate in your world in a particular way, and you yield the fruit of redemption, or forgiveness, or healing, where things are made brand new. So we want to open to that. We want to open to that so that we make our way, and we want to be aware that if you become complacent, you are setting yourself up for displacement. If you become complacent in the way things are in your life, you are definitely going to, because the nature of life is that healing is going to come along no matter what. And if you want to enjoy it, you will participate consciously in that cultivation of healing through divine awareness, through your spiritual practice, through your reading and your meditation and your prayer, and through the deliberate and proper use of intention and understanding the language of your energy body. We want to understand all of that. Are you with me?
Yes.
All right, cool. So one of the first things we want to do, as it says in A Course in Miracles, questioning illusions is the first step into undoing the illusions. We all know that this is virtual reality right here. That the true reality is the essence of your soul. There's no pain, there's no suffering, there's no upset, there's no arduity in God. There is only peace, love, joy, grace, harmony. So we know that that's what we're going for. We want to set that intention. We know that there's no arduousness in God, so there's nothing that needs to be hard or difficult. The only time it's hard or difficult is when we have resistance. So we want to say, okay, I'm going to participate willingly in the benevolent unfoldment of my life. And so we want to highlight the part where we're going to step into the intention and then the allowing. The allowing is a big part. Allowing yourself to step into receiving your good. Because I will tell you, a lot of times people put something out there, the intention goes out, and then the answer's coming in, and then they don't think they deserve it, or they won't let it in, and so they put the brakes on, and then they say, well, the universe doesn't answer my prayers. No, you don't allow the answer to your prayer to come in. So without making ourselves bad or wrong, because that would be another thing, like, oh God, I don't allow it in, there's something wrong with me. No, that's not where we go. We go to, I'm going to allow it in. And that can take a little bit of work. It takes a little softening, it takes a little finessing, but it also takes the choice. I have to choose to allow my good in. And so when we're done with healing, we move into just expanding our good. Because right now we hold a certain amount of good as prosperity, a certain amount of good as wellness, a certain amount of good as joy, a certain amount of good as harmony in our relationships, and all of those things have room to grow. And that's where the beauty of the adventure is. The adventure to becoming victorious. Venturing into victory is what we are here to do, and everybody has everything they need to be victorious. We are to stand in our victory, and we are to remember that the perfect blueprint of whatever you are seeking already exists. The perfect relationship between her and her mom already exists. The healed version, the soul to soul, oh my God, what were we thinking, already exists in the mind of God. That already exists. So if you get into quantum science and all the different dimensions and all the different ways that things can play out, there's one track of energy that goes off that it's going, oh my God, hell in a handbasket. There's another one that goes off and it's like, oh, this one's slightly better. And then there's this one over here, which is perfect. It's absolute perfect reverence, kindness, love, and respect. And that's what we're going for. That's what our teachings are about, is going for the gold, going for being lit. We want to be lit. We want to ignite the fire within our own beingness. That's our responsibility. We want to not be the, as it was saying in the reading, we don't want to be the followers, we want to be the leaders in our lives. And that doesn't mean that we don't listen to some people who have gone before us, and we allow that to go before us and make the crooked path straight. And so we're going to go ahead and we're going to just move into a couple statements of allowing, because allowing is probably one of the most critical pieces of accepting our good. If you're putting something out there and you're not getting it back, then you're probably not allowing yourself to have it. So we're going to go ahead, and I'm just going to invite you to join me and repeat after me. I allow myself to always seek the divine truth.
I allow myself to always seek the divine truth.
I allow myself to heal and grow through love and joy.
I allow myself to heal and grow through love and joy.
I allow myself to thrive in radiant wellness.
I allow myself to thrive in radiant wellness.
And I allow myself to thrive in prosperity and generosity.
I allow myself to thrive in prosperity and generosity.
Now, as we sit in this field with the proclamations that we just did, now, if you practice affirmations where we affirm things, an affirmation, if we don't believe it, is basically kind of practicing denial. If what I'm saying, what I affirm, I don't believe, then I'm canceling it out. So we're going to take what we just proclaimed, and we want to bring it into the high vibratory field of prayer so that we can be a vibrational match with what we're proclaiming. When you are a vibrational match, as Esther and Jerry Hicks would say, with that which you are seeking, it is yours. There is no hesitation. So we want to be in that field where we are a vibrational match with the amount of prosperity, with the amount of wellness, with the amount of goodness, with the amount of harmony. So I'm going to invite you to join me as we turn within, as we deliberately open our hearts into a benevolent space of vulnerability. We allow ourselves to be the adventurers on the path of victory. Victory knowing that it is in God, that all things are made new, that all things are benevolently possible. We open to the benevolent possibilities as we remember the omniamorous omnipotence the light, the love, the wisdom, the intelligence of God, that which knows how to birth and collapse a star, that which knows how to orbit the earth around the sun, that which coded the seeds to become the flowers and the trees, that which knows how to drop the rain from the clouds and scribe the rainbow across the sky. We open to that, to the beauty and to the light and to the love, to the presence of God, and to remembering that we are the beloved in whom God is so pleased, and God is the beloved in whom we are so pleased. That we allow ourselves to feel, see, hear, know our oneness with the divine as we are born in the very image and the very likeness of God. We allow ourselves to move into the thriving, benevolent energies of divine cooperation, of peace, of love, of joy, of mutual beneficial reverence, kindness, love, and respect. We open to the infinite supply of all good in every way, shape, and form, the all good of wellness, the all good of prosperity, the all good of kindness, the all good of beauty and joy, and to the adventure of life. We have already chosen to grow and glow and heal and expand through love and joy, and so we anchor that. We allow it. For we know as we move into the prayer field, that vibratory field, the portal between the finite and the infinite, between us and the eternal light of our soul and the heart of God, all benevolent beauty exists. We open to that, and we allow ourselves to be in divine right receivership, to receive our good. We deserve it. We are entitled to it. It is our destiny. Good to greater good, glory to greater glory. This is the mandate. So we open to that. We open to that. We resist not. And we allow ourselves to hear, feel, see, and know the absolute truth that sets us free. It is from this place of gratitude and thanksgiving, knowing that we have everything we need already, residing, embedded, coded, and loaded within us to receive our good. We let it be, giving it permission. We allow it to be, claiming it so in deep and abiding devotion and thanksgiving by saying, and so it is. Amen. 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 Ashe. Shalom. Hotep. And hallelujah. Yes. All right. Drink that up. And yeah, you know what? This is another round of applause for me, a round of applause for you. This is accepting that we have to come forward for our conscious time of giving and tithing. We're going to go ahead and jump in the gun. That's all right. We're going to take a moment as you prepare your tithe, and remembering that tithing is participating in the art of circulation. And I would say you definitely, if you had taken our prayer class recently and we were doing prosperity and talking about tithing and the vibrational frequency of tithing that takes you to the field of the divine as you circulate the energy of money, of finances. That there's an infinite supply, and so we're not giving from my finite supply as we circulate, we're giving from the infinite supply. And we want to just choose that. Choose it into your being, knowing that as it states in all of the spiritual texts that we are to receive that back minimally tenfold, but I say minimally 100-fold because there's no law that says you have to be limited. And we're going to be in total gratitude knowing as we participate in that we continue to allow that be. If you're watching online, please go to soulcenteroc.com and click the donate button, or you can even text to donate. And we would appreciate if you enjoyed this to please do that as the ushers go forward and we circulate.